the first speaker. Marcus de Satoy is the Professor of Public Understanding of Sciences. Wow. And Professor of Mathematics at at Oxford University. He's also the author of the best-selling mathematics book, The Music of the Primes. His most recent books are What We Cannot Know and The Creativity Code. Really recommend it. For our book, he contributed the chapter Collaboration, Not Competition. We are very happy to have him here. Please welcome Professor Marcus de Satoy.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. In the past, code was written in a very top-down manner. Humans wrote the code, and a machine would implement it at speed and at a depth that we couldn't achieve ourselves. But anything that it produced, really we should credit as the creativity of the humans who wrote that original code. But a few years ago, we've seen a real phase change in the way that code is written, which has allowed for the possibility of a seminar like today, contemplating the fact that code and AI may be creative in its own right. Now we're writing code in a very sort of bottom-up manner. Code is written, then it encounters data, which it learns from, it changes, mutates, becomes something very different from what the original humans started the whole process off in. So that gives us the possibility that if code is changing, becoming something different from the original human creation, that there could be something interestingly new that might come out of that. And for me, the real phase change, the moment when something new kind of happened in artificial intelligence, was a few years ago with the game of Go. You probably remember this news story, but for me, this is really the moment where I think things dramatically changed. The game of Go is this ancient game played on a 19 by 19 grid. You put black and white stones down, you try and enclose more territory than your opponent. And traditionally, as far as computer science was concerned, this was a game that was very hard to write code for, because it was very hard to get from a human exactly why they were making certain moves. You know, if code in the past, if you did this, then you did that. And this was a very much more visual game. It was about pattern recognition. And visuals was always something that artificial intelligence found very difficult. It needed to analyze things pixel by pixel, but didn't understand the overall story that was being told. But DeepMind in London decided that machine learning, this idea that code could learn, was a perfect kind of code to make something that could play this game at a high level. So they gave this code the rules of the game, then they started giving it lots of human games to learn from. It ran out of human games fairly quickly, so it started creating its own synthetic games. It started playing itself. And gradually it began to understand the sort of moves that in the end game would give it a pattern that would give it the potential to win this game. And DeepMind felt that they had trained this thing to a level that they could challenge the world's best. Lee Sedol, sitting there on the right. Lee Sedol, when he heard there was a piece of AI that was going to play him, was completely dismissive. Said, "There's no way this code will ever reach anything near my level. We'd never seen anything code playing this other than a kind of amateur level, very easy to beat." But he was very surprised to emerge the other side of the 5 matches, having lost 4-1. And the one game that he did win, he now regards as the most valuable win of his whole career. Well, we got quite used to AI and computers playing games and beating us. You know, in the 90s we had Deep Blue playing chess. So perhaps not surprising that at some point this game would be played at a better level by a piece of code or a computer. But actually what I think the most significant thing was this thing that happened in the second game of this match. There's now referred to move 37 of game 2 is regarded as as a real game changer in many ways, quite literally in this game. Lee Sedol had played his white stone 36 move of the game. He was already quite exhausted by game 2. He retired to the top of the hotel in Seoul to smoke a cigarette. We humans still need nicotine and caffeine to stimulate our creativity. AlphaGo, the name of the code that was playing this game, thought for a while. There's obviously some AI complaining already about the back there, but thought for a while and then asked the human who was placing the stones. Interestingly, we still needed a human to pick up the stones, which is quite fiddly, and this piece of kit is still much better than a robotic thing. So the human was placing the stones, but asked the human to place a stone on the 5th row in from the edge, this little black stone with a white dot on it. I was watching these games obsessively on YouTube Live because I regard mathematics as very similar to playing the game of Go, and I thought if AI could play Go, then it'd probably be able to do maths next. So I was going through a very existential crisis during these matches. And I remember all the commentators gasping when this move was played. And they said, oh, well, at least it all will be able to win the game from here, because playing a stone in quite deep into the board at this point of the game is regarded as a very weak move. Traditionally, Go players would play on the first 4 rows in from the edge early on in the game. This is where the strong moves for early territory in the game would be played. So something like this was regarded just as a really bad move. And when Lee Sedol came back down again, you could see he looked at this move and thought, he'd already got some respect for this code. The first game he'd lost, and he was quite shocked by this. So he knew there must be something more than just a mistake here. But he couldn't work out what the point of a seemingly weak move like this was. But as the game moved on, towards the end of the game, competition for territory emerging from the bottom right-hand corner, it turned out that the key move was that move 37. AlphaGo controlled that whole swathe of territory due to the move that he'd made, or I've already anthropomorphized, he or she or it had made early on in the game. And for me, this move passes 3 tests that I'm looking for if I'm going to call something creative. I mean, what do we mean by creativity? It's one of these incredibly amorphous words that it's quite hard to pin down. A bit like consciousness, what is creativity? But I quite like Margaret Bowden's definition. I was on a committee with Margaret Bowden, a cognitive scientist at the Royal Society. We were looking at the impacts that this new technology was going to have on society. And she told me this definition, which I've used quite often. You should regard something as creative if it's new. Well, novelty you can judge quite objectively. Computers can easily make new things quite quickly. But there are 2 other qualities which are much more subjective. It should be surprising. It should engage our emotions. It should make us wake up and go, oh, hold on. I want make you look at the world in a new way. But it shouldn't just be, shock for shock value. It should have some value in its own right. It should have some lasting value to make you look at the world in a new way. And I think this move 37, so it was a new sort of move. It was surprising. All the commentators kind of reacted with kind of shock. They woke up. But ultimately, in a game, it's very easy to prove value. Does it win or lose you the game? So for me, I think this was a game changer. This was a phase change in the fact that code could, through its learning process, come up with something that was creative. And I would say this is the creativity of the code and not the humans who coded it. Because if the humans had seen this line, play 5th row in from the edge this early on, the humans would have deleted that line of code as, no, that's a weak move, it's learned something bad. This is a line of code that emerged out of playing the game itself and learning about how to play this game in a new way. And it really has taught us to play the game in a new way. I think Lee Sedol thought that we'd reached the kind of peak way of playing this game. His style of play was regarded as a kind of the way everyone aspired to play this game. But AlphaGo has kind of cleared this fog around this peak, and turns out it isn't the highest way to play this game. We got stuck on what we mathematicians called a local maximum. Yeah, we thought that we were at the top of somewhere how to play things. But AlphaGo has kind of cleared the fog and shown us that if we take a risk and go down the kind of what we call the adaptive valley, we might find an even higher peak. And it's taught us to play this game in a new way. which I think is really exciting. And that's why I call my book, my chapter in this book, collaboration, not competition. These tools can help us to see how to do things in a new way, break us out perhaps of rather mechanistic, machine-like ways of thinking where we get stuck in ways of doing things, and it can make new suggestions for us. So when I saw this, it really set me off on a kind of journey which culminated in this book that I wrote, The Creativity Code, looking at, well, okay, this game of Go is a fairly confined, safe territory to explore code. It's black and white pixels, 19 by 19 grid. But what about things of a more human creative nature? If it can be creative there, could it be creative in our own domains of creativity? And it's interesting, one of the first people to ever write code was already thinking about the possibility that code might do something more interesting than just kind of simple computation. We celebrate Ada Lovelace Day every October. Ada Lovelace being the first person to think about writing instructions to get a machine to do something interesting. She'd been taken along by her mother, who wanted to expose her to the great scientific developments of the Victorian age. Her mother had taken her to see Charles Babbage's analytic engine. This was a machine that Babbage had created to speed up computation, multiplication, long division, things like this. But when Lovelace saw this machine, she said, I think it can do slightly more interesting things than just computation. She said the engine might compose elaborate and scientific pieces of music of any degree of complexity or extent. So she was already thinking about something a little bit more sort of artistic, creative, and music and mathematics, lots of connections between those. A lot about, often call mathematics the science of patterns, music is the art of patterns. So if it can learn about patterns, maybe it can create its own. But she had a word of caution when she wrote this. She said, well, still the creativity is not the creativity of the machine, it's the creativity of the human who writes the instructions. She wrote it's desirable to guard against the possibility of exaggerated ideas that might arise as the powers of the analytic engine. It has no pretensions whatever to originate anything. It does whatever we order it to perform. And I think she was right. In the past, that was how code worked. But that's what I think has changed. This is not now what's happening. Code is now learning to do new things. And so there's an idea that's kind of emerged. You probably all know the Turing test. Can a computer convince you online that it's actually human intelligence and you can't tell the difference between the computer and a human that you're interacting with? Well, people have now developed this idea of something called the Lovelace test. So could a machine originate a creative piece of art such that the process is repeatable? So this is quite important because you don't want it just to be something that the computer itself doesn't really understand. It should be embedded in the code that this creativity has emerged. So it shouldn't be a hardware glitch or taking random data from the outside, which produces some sort of illusion of agency in the machine. It should really be the agency of the actual code itself, which has produced a piece of work. But the programmer is unable to explain actually how the algorithm produces output. So it's really emerged from the machine itself, and we didn't kind of put it in. So I would say the Lovelace test has been passed in the very tight, clean environment of this game of Go. But what about beyond that, in the sort of more realm of the human creative arts? I mean, we've heard about things like DALL-E, ChatGPT. Is true creativity emerging out of these tools? One of the things I said at the beginning, that code was finding it difficult to play Go because Go is a very visual game. And in the past, AI, one of the big hurdles was vision. It really didn't know what it was looking at. But that has really changed. So the visuals, I think, is where this new machine learning AI has been very, very strong. And it is in the visual world that we've seen, I think, the most interesting creative output from this kind of style of coding. And so some of the very early examples, was can AI learn style? Can it replicate style? Can it take data and produce something which is comparable? That's a good, all artists kind of start there. Picasso started with, okay, I'm going to learn the art of the past before I start breaking it. So here's one of the early examples of how effective this AI was at picking up style. for a start, can you tell me one of these is by a human, one of these is by AI, but can you already tell me who the human is? Who's the artist that is behind this? Can you recognize the style? This is Rembrandt. Exactly. You can already recognize Rembrandt. If I give you a Rembrandt portrait, there's something about a Rembrandt which is very distinctive. And can the AI pick that up? Yes, it can. It can really pick up a quality of Rembrandt's light, the way somebody sits, the style. So I'll do a little vote. So who thinks the AI Rembrandt, the one that isn't human, is the painting on your left? Put your hands up if you think the painting on the left is the AI one. Okay, put your hands up if you think the AI one is the one on the right. Yeah, so a majority are going for the one on the right is the AI one. Who isn't sure? Yeah, a few people are like, oh my gosh. Well, I think actually the one on the left is the AI one. So I think, and essentially it has a kind of almost photographic, it's almost too good. In fact, the one on the right, I had a little challenge because, most of you know your Rembrandt. So I had to find a Rembrandt that you wouldn't know. So actually the Rembrandt, the only one I didn't recognize is actually rather shit Rembrandt. So it's kind of got this rather fuzziness but I think this is already good, that AI is sort of managing to convince you that it can produce style. But, we want true creativity. We don't want pastiche, things that we've done already. Can AI produce something that is a genuinely new style, not old style? But it's got to take, where every artist will start with the art of the past in order to move into the art of the new. So here's some art, one again created by AI, one created 4 paintings by AI, 4 paintings by humans. Again, can you pick out the ones which are artificial inside this? So I'll take a little vote. So the ones on the left, do you think those are the AI pieces of art? Hands up if you think those are. Okay, and who thinks the ones on the right are the AI art? Now, yeah, so you've all put your hand up. Either you think, oh, well, he will have swapped them over because he's probably like symmetry being a mathematician. But no, actually, it's very interesting. Most of you are able to identify correctly that the art on the right is the AI art. And why I think this is interesting is that, for a few years now, we've seen art being produced by AI, and we can recognize it. It's got a style. It's got its own distinctive style. And actually, these are created by generative adversarial networks, which I think are a very interesting sort of algorithm, because this is sort of 2 algorithms working in competition against each other. One trying to learn the art of the past and make something that breaks style, and the other algorithm saying, no, you haven't moved far enough, or, well, that isn't art. So it's trying to find this sweet spot between something new but not too new that we find it's kind of objectionable. And actually, this is a technology that's been around for a few years. I genuinely think this is a more interesting technology than Stable Diffusion or Midjourney or DALL-E. I think already we're beginning to recognize DALL-E pictures. But actually, I don't think they're as interesting as the pictures that are being produced they're too human in a way. We've smoothed off the rough edges. The rough edges, I think, are what were interesting about the GANs, the complexity. We're just seeing things which are a kind of interesting mix of ideas that we haven't seen before, but it's still recognizably human. I think that's rather boring. So I think although there's a lot of excitement about DALL-E and Midjourney and things, I think these GANs are actually more interesting. They're pushing into something which has its own genuine computer AI style. But in a way, I think the most interesting visual creative pieces of work that I've seen emerge actually are rather kitsch sort of visuals, but actually I think get more to the heart of what creativity is really about. I like Margaret Bowden's definition of creativity. It's quite useful as a way of testing things. But actually, the one I really preferred in my book was Carl Rogers, psychologist's kind of idea of creativity. The creativity was humans' tool that emerged to try and explore this strange inner world that was emerging when we started to become conscious. And to understand, the whole point about something like the Turing test is, I want to understand it. Are you conscious, or maybe you're all sitting at home in the warmth of your homes and you sent out your avatars today, and how many of you are actually genuinely conscious? Maybe you're all just a bunch of zombies. How can I tell? How can I explore whether your pain or your feeling of cold or your feeling of joy and love is anything like mine? When this kind of idea of consciousness emerged, my thesis is that human creativity emerged at the same time as human consciousness. And then we needed a tool to kind of explore what it was that was going on inside of us, and also to try and express that in a way to share it with others to test whether, is your consciousness anything like my consciousness? So I think one of the most interesting visual examples was this thing, Deep Dream, that Google came up with. Because what they said is, we've created this wonderful vision recognition software. It can recognize visuals, but what is it really seeing? It's telling us that it's seeing a Christmas tree or a boat on an ocean, but what is it kind of really seeing? So they kind of reversed the process. They said, okay, we're going to give it a visual which doesn't have anything very clear in it, but we're going to ask it to just accentuate anything that it sees in that visual, dial that up, so we can sort of see what it's seeing inside something which doesn't really have much context to it. So for example, if you gave it this picture of jellyfish, what was the AI seeing? A bit like when you look at the clouds in the sky and we see like a snake or a dragon or a sheep. Well, this is the kind of thing that emerged from this. It's right. Sorry, you're not mic'd up, so you. But this kind of really psychedelic world. I mean, let's go back. They're not particularly great art. It's not. But what I think is interesting is you're seeing what it's learned on. It's learned on lots of images of animals, of faces, of eyes, of machines. And so you understand a little bit about the learning process of the code by asking it to express itself. And in this way, we can actually pick up things like bad learning. So, for example, in this one, it was given a kind of grey background and asked, what do you see? And it started seeing dumbbells. But the dumbbells that it drew all had arms attached to them. And you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, it's never seen a dumbbell on its own. It thinks it's an extension of human anatomy, that when we grow, to our press-ups, we suddenly grow these dumbbells. So this is what, I think we're in a very dangerous place where the learning that's going on, the code that's emerging is so complex, we cannot see how it's making its decisions. It's like our neuronal activity. You can't understand what somebody is thinking or why they're making certain moves by looking at synaptic and neuronal activity. You have to ask them to compress that and download it into language or art or music. We need these other tools to try and understand the complexity of the code in our heads. Well, it's the same thing. We are going to need tools to understand this code that is emerging, because it's far too complex to understand on a line-to-line level. So I think the most interesting kind of creativity projects are not about helping us to be creative, which is interesting, and we're going to hear more about that, but actually is as a tool, as Carl Rogers said, to explore our own inner worlds. But we've got this new inner world emerging. The inner world of the code is not conscious yet. I mean, at some point this thing will say, iPhone think, therefore iPhone am. And we might have to think, already, the person at Google who got laid off thought his machine was becoming conscious. We're going to have ways of knowing that. And how will we know? We'll know when it starts. I would say a word that's important in distinguishing AI and human at the moment is intention. AlphaGo didn't want to play Go. The intention came from us. Intentionality is human. But when it becomes conscious AI, it will have intention. It will need to tell us, hey, something really new is going on inside here. And so I think the creativity of AI will be a way of understanding that phase change, which will happen but a long time from now. But I think there's a phase change already. We got a sort of subconscious code. It's making decisions, but it can't tell you why. So we need ways to probe that. So I think the visual has been very interesting, and we'll hear a little bit more about the collaboration between visual, to create visuals that happened for this book. The other one, which Martin referred to, which has been quite dominant, is the idea of ChatGPT, things that can write text. And that's been quite exciting, and everyone's getting very worried, how are students at university going to deal with this thing? Do we have to already accept? But I think there are limitations with text as well. Yeah, it can write songs, short form and things, but I think that one of the things that AI, and this is something I write about in the chapter, AI is having a real difficult time with anything which has too much of a temporal element to it. That what it does is produce things locally that we kind of appreciate, make sense, are stimulating, but in the global, it's sort of losing. It kind of starts to become just a kind of stream of consciousness when you're, ChatGPT, if you read it beyond about 3 pages, it does have memory now, so it knows that it said something, but it doesn't have enough memory to really tell you something interesting. I mean, Pharmaco AI, which is a book that I wrote a review of, which is a collaboration between an artist and GPT-3 at the time, is an amazingly wild book. But in the end, it becomes very boring because it's just kind of a stream of artistic and AI consciousness. And I think, AI is quite good in the short form. There was a group of artists and AI coders in America who are big Harry Potter fans, and they were really keen to, they were a bit disappointed there were only 7 volumes of Harry Potter. Actually, I'll just, I'll skip over this. So they got an AI to learn on Harry Potter's, on J.K. Rowling's 7 volumes, to try and learn it to produce an 8th volume. And he came up with some pretty good text to start with. Actually, I really love the title. It says, Harry Potter and the Portrait of What Looked Like a Large Pile of Ash. Which I think is a great title for a book. I'd read that. Anyway, it started off pretty well. So these are the opening lines. Magic. It was something that Harry Potter thought was very good. So it's already picked up by reading the text of the 7 volumes that magic is a major theme in these books. And the Harry Potter is probably a key character. Leathery sheets of rain lashed at Harry's ghost as he walked across the grounds towards the castle. Well, I love that idea. I don't think I would have come up with that image of leathery, rain like leather. So I think that's already quite creative. But from that point on, it started to lose the plot, quite literally. So Ron was standing there and doing a kind of frenzied tap dance. He saw Harry and immediately began to eat Hermione's family. Ron's Ron shirt was just as bad as Ron himself. So this is probably a little unfair example, but I think that is a kind of interesting thing, that at the moment, both visuals are moments in time, and it's been very good at visuals creatively. But anything which has this temporal element, it sort of hasn't learned how to tell a story. And that's what's interesting in respect to my own work. I mean, one of the big themes is how soon is it before mathematicians will be put out of a job? See, I think most people think, well, mathematics, surely that's first, because code is algorithms, algorithms is mathematics. It's already doing maths when it's implementing code. But actually, that's the big difference. You see, a mathematician isn't just proving all the true statements about numbers and geometry. We're making choices. We're telling stories about our numbers and our geometry. We are making choices about the things that will move the audience. The surprises are the mathematics that I produce are the ones where I'm going to take my audience in a direction and they go, oh, where did that come from? I didn't realize that was going to be connected. I'm telling a story. And that's why I feel I'm still safe at the moment, because in a way, AI doesn't have a story to tell. It can generate lots of mathematics, but most of it is going to be boring and will not resonate with us. But I don't think it's too long before it'll start to learn, well, what is the mathematics that emotionally moves an audience? But ultimately, what is this AI? Is this AI producing things that will be creatively interesting for us as humans? Well, I think actually we're starting to see a drift where AI is producing things that it thinks is creatively interesting and that other AIs might find interesting, but we're going to start to, I don't understand that. I can't listen to that music. It's far too complex. That visual, I don't know what's going on. But the AI is saying, oh, I can deal with this. My favorite AI film is Her, which some of you may have seen, where somebody falls in love with their operating system. But halfway through the movie, spoiler alert, the AI dumps the human and says, well, and the human's devastated, and then finds out that the AI has been having a relationship with like 10,000 other people at the same time. And the AI says, well, yeah, but you're all so slow and boring. You take so long to say. And the AI can learn about another AI in just a backstory and just look at the back code, the learning process, and can start to do something new. In a way, their temporal idea of time is so much faster. We look at a mountain and think it's static, But if we look in deep time, that mountain is dynamic, it's moving. Nature is having a whole communication with itself. But we don't understand that temporal line. I think that AI is going to start being creative, but creative for its own medium rather than for us. But at the moment, we're still, I think, collaborating, and that's going to produce an interesting future. I think, as Martin said, the radiologist and the AI together will go further than each one on its own, and I believe that's true also with creative arts. Thank you.